will be a little bit cramped because I'm going to try to split the screen here. So this is the code I gave you guys. I'm going to open up the 3 files at least. I guess we can just look at the JavaScript. The other stuff is all the same, so we don't have to open up everything. And then open this up. Okay, and share the screen. Okay. You guys see my giant black screen? Cool, thank you. All right, so on the left, I have the working version of 17. This is just the JavaScript file. And then on the right is what I gave you guys to fill in the blanks. And more than ever, make this your own. So feel free to throw out anything I gave you if you think you can do better. And I don't mean that sarcastically. There's nothing really particularly great about this, so you could probably do better. So so don't let anything I did hold you back on this. But I'll just kind of I'm just going to kind of go relatively top to bottom and just compare and contrast the working version with the starter version. And you'll notice that for the most part, I took I had comments in the finished version, and I kind of just left the comments in on the version I gave you. So I'll just kind of go from there. So most of the stuff is going to be the same. So I have all the global variables left in there, and you'll notice. I don't remember if I did this on the last project or not, but in ES6, and I have a note in here about ES6 that we're using let instead of var. And I think I mentioned this maybe before break, but just to reiterate, let is probably preferred in JavaScript now going forward, but var is still more prevalent. So you should know both and what the difference is. Let is block scoped, and var is function scoped. And a lot of times that means the same thing because, simple programs, a block is a function and a function is a block. It's just the section of curly braces. But sometimes it's not the same thing. And in most programming languages like Java and C++, the variables are going to be block scoped. So, like if you have a loop, like a for loop, you can have a variable in there, and once it's out of scope, that variable goes away, and you can reuse it for something else. So, if you're totaling up numbers or something. So, long story short, let gives it the behavior that's in most programming languages. So, in this program, I'm using let instead of var. So, just a heads up on that. In here, I could have used var, and in fact, I did literally just search and replace and use let instead of var, and everything worked the same. So all that stuff is exactly the same. We're using const. Const is just variables that don't change. They're constants. And please stop if you have any questions about any of this stuff at all. So if any of this sounds foreign at all, it means I didn't do a good job covering it the first time. Okay. And so when I use constants, and I think this is pretty universal, we tend to put these in all caps just to symbolize that these are things that you shouldn't mess with. Okay, so and they should be pretty rare. There shouldn't be too many of these. In fact, I maybe went overboard on having a lot of constants. And then these are some global variables that are just set up. I initialized these for my sound. These are where the sound labels are. And then I have my global functions. All this stuff is all the same. Okay. And if you validate your code that I gave you right out of the gate, you're going to get errors for all this stuff. It just means that you're not using it because it's not used anywhere in the code. But I left that there in case you do want to use it. If you don't, you can get rid of it. Okay, so then we're going to get down to the update wallet. That's the first part where I have code here that you don't have here. Okay, so all update wallet does is if you want to replicate the same function, is it takes an amount which can be positive or negative, and it updates the wallet by that amount. Okay, and I'm doing some other fancier stuff with that where I'm like counting up, like I refill it and kind of animate the amount. That's what this does. You don't have to do it that way. You could just change it and update it visually. That's totally fine. And I play a sound as it's refilling. You don't have to do it that way. You could literally just update the wallet variable. And then we have our objects, the card, and the deck. Those are done already. So those we have filled. I have these collapsed over here, so I'll just collapse them over here. I think I went through those before, so I'll skip that. But I'm happy to, if there's anything in there that you don't understand, I'm happy to go back on that. All right, I'm going to try to go through this quickly, unless you have questions. So, all right. So just like any of the other object functions that we've created before, where we're going to create an object, I have these internal property variables. Okay, so I'm starting those with an underscore. That's just the convention I use for this. Everybody doesn't do that in JavaScript, so that's just kind of how I'm setting these up, if you recall. So again, you can do what you want with this. You don't have to call it game even if you don't want to. Okay, as long as it works and it validates, you can do what you want to do. Okay, but I'm utilizing deck, so I create a new deck. I create two arrays, a dealer hand and a player hand. So those are arrays, and if you recall, this is how we create an empty array. Just open bracket, close bracket. An array is just a collection of variables. And then I fill the, I have a kind of a pseudo array for dealer images that holds the dealer image slots, all the 10 slots for the dealer images, the cards, and the same, and the same thing for the player images. Sorry, I jumped down there. Then I have set up the dealer score, player score. I have this, and then finally I have this kind of switching property, just a toggle for whether that first card is hidden or not for the dealer. So if you recall, when you're playing the game, when you deal a card when you deal the first two cards for the dealer, the first card is hidden. Okay. And then I just create the object. So that's what my is all about, if you recall. And I put all those variables into it. And then I have all these accessor functions. You don't need to do those if you don't want to, if you remember. I just always put those in here. And then I take them out if I don't end up using them, if it's a production program. But so again, these are sort of optional. And then I have a couple helper functions here, wallet message and game message, as part of game. So these are just to update the wallet message and update game message. It doesn't do anything else, so I just pass a message in and update the appropriate thing. So wallet message is just like you're out of money. Game messages like game over or you busted or things like that. I should scroll down here. So I put comments in here in the starter version that describes the things that are missing for the most part. So here's the object part. That's the divider, and then it talks about the methods that are here. Okay, so then here I am I'm at the same place here. So, and the line numbers, of course, don't correspond. So, because there's a bunch of code missing. So button set, all this does is enables and disables the buttons. So if you recall, when you are when the game is over, it doesn't make sense to have the hit button activated. But when you're in the game, it doesn't make sense to have the new game button activated. So it toggles the disabled enabled state of those. So I have a status variable that gets passed in there, either true or false. And if it's true, I set it this way. If it's false, I set it this way. You could do it differently. This is not the best because true and false doesn't really mean anything in this context, because what is true, what is false. This is not the best. I should have probably even done some additional explanation in here. You could definitely do better, but that's how I did it. Did somebody have a question? My chat went away. Okay, no. Set winner. All this does is it sets the winner and the loser, and it just adds the color to the cards. So you don't even have to do that if you don't want to. That's just fun stuff. Then I have, you do need to do some sort of dealing. So here I pass in the hand of whichever, whether it's the player or the dealer. So I pass in either player or dealer, and then I add a card to the appropriate hand. Okay, and then that's all this really does. Okay, and if you're out of cards, it does check to see if you're out of cards. Then it will create a new deck and shuffle the cards for the dealer to deal more cards. And you don't probably strictly have to do this. You could have an unlimited supply of cards. I just wanted to make it a little more real world. Have a set number of cards, and when you run out of when you after you go through the whole deck, it has to create a new deck and kind of start fresh, just to keep the randomness high. I don't know if that was strictly necessary, but that's how I implemented that. And then setup, which is called way at the bottom. All setup does is creates the deck and shuffles the deck. Okay, just like up here. So I actually could have called setup here. Let's see. So then I have get wager, and get wager simply calls the wager field, checks to make sure it's a legal value, and then make sure that it's above 1 and below the amount you have in your wallet, and sets the messages appropriately if it's not, and rounds it up if it's too low, and rounds it down rounds it up if it's too low, rounds it down if it's too high. Start round is the complicated one. This one's really long, so it has a whole bunch of things that it's doing here. This probably should have been separated out into a few different methods, but so every time you start a new round, every time we have to reset the player score and the dealer score to 0. So every time you have a new round, you're dealt new cards, so you start out at 0 until you get some cards. So these are 0. And then we have to update the display. So we have our internal values, but then we have what we show to the people that are watching on the screen. So we have to update the display of that. And then we're going to clear the hands out. So up till this point, you still have cards in your array in your hand. And then we're going to say dealer hidden is true. So we're hiding that card again. So up until this point, your cards were still visible. So you had that visible card was, it was visible. The dealer card was visible. And then we clear out the game message, like the game over. And if you do any effects that show like winner and loser, like I did, I have to take those off. And I did this sort of sloppily too. I went through and grabbed all the images on the page, and in my case, all the images are cards. I'm not using any other images, so this actually works fine. But if you used any other images, it would include all the images on the page in this, and that could create some other weird effects depending on what you're setting up for classes and whatnot. So just be aware of that. So there's that. It's going to take the winner and loser class off of those images. So it'll take the red and the green off of there. And we're going to update the buttons to the new game state. We're going to update the player wallet. We're going to get the wager. So it's going to check to make sure the wager's okay. We're going to set the cards to all the dealer images to blank. We're going to play the deal sound. We're going to deal 2 cards and make sure one of them is flipped upside down. And do the same thing for the player. Okay, and I think that is basically that. Yep, okay. Then we're down to add cards. So for add cards, we pass in a hand array. I probably should have called this hand array to differentiate it from the hand string that I used in the method up above. That's kind of sloppy too. Probably should label my variables better, but I did say it in the comments here. But so this hand is different from the hand up above, so just be aware of that. So in here, I am looping through. I'm for eaching through that array. So this could be either the dealer hand or the player hand. And I'm going through those arrays, and I'm getting the number value of each of the cards that are in the hand, and I'm totaling those up, okay? And I'm returning that total. Okay, so this is where we're calculating the score for the most part, okay? And then part 2 of the score is down here. So this is score actually calls add cards right here, okay? But score also updates the display, and it also checks to see if that hidden card is hidden, and if it is, it removes that hidden card from the score, because we don't want to add that in because we don't know what that value is until it gets flipped over. The computer knows what it is, but the players aren't supposed to know. Okay. Any questions so far? Want to make sure you guys still hear me. You fell asleep. I got disconnected. Everything's broken. Okay, thank you. All right. Hit is the function method that gets called when you click the hit button. Okay. So in this case, we are setting up an array that holds the hidden card images, and so if you recall, there's 10 slots that have 10 slots where there can be card images for both the player and the dealer. So in case of hit, we're dealing with the player, and so there's the where the cards are visible, and then there's where the cards are invisible. So this array is going to hold all of the invisible slots. Okay, so this is just a little trick that I'm using to be able to display a card in the first invisible slot. Okay, so I'm grabbing all the invisible ones. Then I just set up a variable to hold the file name for the newest image. I'm doing a test to make sure that we don't have more than 10 cards because we only have 10 slots. This should only matter if any of our constants up above change. The way this works is if we shouldn't be able to go over 10 cards anyway, and I'm kind of making a note of that here. But if you change any of the constants, this is just a double check here. Okay, so then I put those images into hidden card images. So I select all those, and then I play that. I play the card sound to play a card. You don't have to have a sound if you don't want to. I display the recent card, and this probably looks a little more complex than it is. Let's see if I can just make this big for a little bit. Oh, why did it jump way down? That's rude. Okay, 521. That's weird. I don't know why it jumps when. Yeah, my cursor's right there. That's weird. Okay. So on 521, this probably looks more complicated than it is. So in the player hand array, so that is the array that holds your cards. We are so we added a card to our hand, okay, and that's what this does. So this adds a card onto our hand, and then what we want to do is we want to get the file name of that card that we just added, and that's what this does. Okay, so we're getting the very last item. So player hand.length is equal to the number of items we have in our array, and the last item of our array is number of items in the array minus 1, okay, because we start at 0. So if we have 10 items in our array, the last item is number 9. So that's what this is, and it looks a little complicated. That's why, okay. And then we just call the, because this is an object, the player hand is an object, we just call the f name, the file name on that that actual. We want to get that item. We want to get this, the player hand. We're getting an individual card, so we're calling that individual cards method f name. That just gets the file name. Okay, so that's in the card object. So we're calling the f name that gets the actual image file name, and that's so we can set that here. So we want to set the source of hidden card images sub-0. That's the very first of the hidden images to new image. Seems a little complicated, but it allows us to do without much code. And you don't get extra points for not much code, but as long as you can do it succinctly and explain it, that can be helpful. And this shouldn't be super hard to explain, but hopefully I didn't confuse anything too much. And then finally, we just call that show, that global function show, to flip this over, or to unhide it. Okay, so that's all the hard stuff. So now, let's see. Oops. Sorry, drop me back a little bit. So now, after hit, we have stand, and stand is simply exactly the same as hit, the way I implemented it anyway. It just does it for the dealer instead of the player. So we have hidden card images, new image, all this stuff is the same. It just is going to set up a while loop with some conditions to check to see when it should stop. So like, did the dealer score go beyond the dealer stand amount, which is 10? So does the dealer score, is it higher than 10? Does the dealer already have 10 cards? Is the dealer score already past the player in terms of score? All these things, all these conditions. So while these things are while the conditions are all true, then then just repeat that process that we did for the player. Do that for the dealer. Just deal a card and display it. Okay, so it works exactly the same way. If I thought it would be not confusing, I maybe would have even made another method to just call that and say do that for the player instead of the do it for the dealer instead of the player. Okay, and then bust is just called when you after you hit stand. We have to call bust to see if we busted, and all that does is just say, did you go over the score? And so then we just give a message that says that. When you hit the stand button, we also check to see if there's a winner. So is the player score greater than the dealer score, less than, or are you tied? And one thing that probably looks a little bit weird, we have to update your wallet. So again, I said that the wallet, the way I implemented it, can be negative. So if you lose, so if the dealer wins, I can pass a negative number in. So if I have a wager of like, my wallet's 500, and I bet $400, I want to pass in negative 400. So I just did that by saying 0 minus player wager. Okay, so that might look a little weird, but that's what that's all about. And that is kind of it. And then we're all the way down to the bottom. And I have some sounds. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. I left the game in here. I kind of really just said straight out what I did here. So I'm calling setup, calling button set, calling game message, calling update wallet. And then I have my click handlers for new game, hit, and stand. New game, I'm clearing the wallet message. I'm setting up my button sets for the first time. I'm calling start round, that big function that does all that stuff for each round. And I'm updating and displaying the score. Hit is where the action of the game happens. Every time you hit, it calls the hit function, updates the score, and checks to see if we went over 17. Checks to see if we busted. And then stand is where we determine who won and lost, basically. So we call stand, we call score to update the score, and we call winner. And that is it. So anybody have any questions about anything about this at all? Anything you want me to loop back on? I try to go fast but slow. Thorough but not boring. It's still early for me. I stayed up too late. Is there a video from Tuesday? I think there is. I might not have uploaded it. So probably yes. I think there is. Yeah. Good question. I will try to hunt that down and put that out. Let me see if I have that. What did we do Tuesday? Maybe there isn't. Oh, I might not have recorded Tuesday then. Sorry. So, Drew, if you have questions about address book, I'm happy to go through anything you might have about that. I'm happy to go through any questions on any of the projects, really. I don't want to leave anybody. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thanks for the clarification. Yeah. I'm very confused lately. Yeah, so we didn't do anything really with the 17. So you didn't miss anything from 17. So I'm gonna hit stop on this unless anybody has questions about that. If you do have questions, I'd like to get those on the video, on the recording. Going once, going twice. At least until next week.